Later. So, hello everyone. Today I kind of want to have a conversation about two different topics. The first one being EIP 4444, which of course is the bound historical data for Ethereum Gnosis Chain. I think we quickly alluded to it on Telegram from the private group, but yeah, my question is like, how far are we from it, and what options are there to solve the data? So we talked about Portal, which is not ready yet on Ethereum, and potentially BitTorrent. What are your thoughts on that side? I guess it's just some nuts from Nethermind and Geth and Erigon, sorry, and Mark maybe. But yeah, Mark, go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry. First of all, there is one alternative that is being considered right now in Ethereum. Maybe not alternative as a first step for force, and this is to drop all blocks before the merge. And if Ethereum will go in this way, probably would be a good idea to go in the same direction in Gnosis Chain. And as a next step, EIP for force. So EIP for force is about dropping history up to the 1 year, and the other proposal is to drop before the merge. I think it's about some details in ERA formats, so they can handle pre-merge block formats, but not post-merge, but I might be wrong here. Another thing to discuss is not how to deal it with client, but as you mentioned, how we want to store historical data, and because Ethereum aims to have this portal network which is decentralized and so on, and yeah, that's the open question: what we would like to achieve and what is good enough for Gnosis Chain. If we want to have the same decentralized network, and if yes, then who can do that? Because on Ethereum side, EF has like dedicated portal network team, which is doing this development, and probably they will take care of that network. Yeah, so that's just starting this discussion.
So do you have some more information about what Portal Network actually is? Like how it works? Is it a separate like chain, whatever? What is it exactly?
I can talk about it.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that I have important caveats with the Portal Network. Basically, well, I don't know. I'll moderate my language. But the Portal Network is a parallel network of DHT tables that will be used for data distribution and retrieval on a P2P network. So the idea is that you would have, imagine a concentric set of networks where the most central one is the current dev P2P, where all the nodes distribute all the data. Then this data would flow outwards into the Portal network bridge nodes. And a DHT network is a big table based on node ID. So it's kind of like IPFS. You would get, depending on your node ID, you are assigned different bits of data that you have to custody. So if you have the key number 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to custody this chunk of this block and this chunk of this state and this chunk of this receipt, whatever. And then if you want to retrieve this data, you would use the node IDs of people to work your way through the tables and locate where the data is. I think that's the whole idea, summarized as possible. The issue with the DHTs is that they can be spammed. Like you can create as many node IDs as you want on a specific, like you can brute force node IDs and take over specific packets So you can make specific sections of the tables unavailable, and that's something that's very difficult to remedy. And also, Ethereum going to data availability sampling suffers from the same issues, and there is this crazy zero knowledge proof protocol that the crypto team are developing to find it. But anyway, the point is that it's a very difficult problem that would maybe never be solved. And also, the network needs to have sufficient replication, otherwise data will be lost. And the more you replicate, the more bandwidth. So the more total storage you need. Say that blocks plus state, I don't know, it's like 200 gigabytes. If you want a factor of replication of 16, then you need the network as a whole to store a significant amount of data. And if you split that among the nodes, that's kind of a lot. So yeah, my point is that the portal network basic premises have not been proven yet to work. So it's the most, out of all the options, is the one that has the most promise. So it's definitely worthwhile to spend resources on it, but has a chance of not succeeding. So there are other approaches that are not as scalable or pure. Like what the portal network promises is a truly decentralized way to retrieve data that even works really well under a future-like client paradigm. And that's why it's worth exploring. But if we just want to go on the BitTorrent way or something like that, I think it should be fine, and it will definitely work. It has different concerns, but I think they are easier to digest. So yeah, that's my take.
Good. So would there be, like, Erigon right now is seeding a lot of data using torrents, right? Would this be like an alternative? Maybe not forever or something like that, but just in the meantime, basically, to get this out and allow our users to, well, have to store less data, like, in the near future.
I mean, I'm not an execution dev, but I would say so.
I don't know, Somnat, if you have some expertise on that side regarding, well, from Erigon, or if I'm here or something.
So with Erigon 2, the historical data is stored in snapshots and is distributed over torrent, and you sort of can separate this process of seeding and downloading. So it's possible to just run this module, also known as the downloader module, separately from the main process and seed all the files for availability. And then you can sort of delete the historical data with pruning, basically. So Erigon uses this term called pruning to delete historical data. So in a way, you'd be fine. You'd be able to sync up to the tip if you have snapshots enabled for the main process, and if there are enough seeders on the network supplying you with those flat files. But it won't be possible for Erigon 2 at the moment to sync without it. So there is no state snapshot per se, which would just allow you to download state as is at a certain point in history or at the current chain tip. But that sort of a thing would be enabled in the near future with Erigon 3. So with Erigon 3, the model of flat files and torrent networking is going to be there, with the added advantage that you can download the current state snapshot, as in the whole state with all the data in it, right away using those files. And the need for historical data would only be there if you are serving historical data to other users or for RPCs. So with Erigon 3, you can sort of theoretically enable 4444 just by some flags. But again, that would mean that there would be two categories of nodes on the network. One which do serve older files for nodes that are running Erigon 2 or other nodes with older versions. And there would be these nodes that do not serve the historical data. So it may be a confusion, or it may be a separation of categories of people into parasitic and non-parasitic nodes. But if the whole network wants to move forward with not keeping the historical data, then it would only boil down to nodes or providers who want to provide this service for, say, a fee or something to other users or other node runners separately. You can sort of do that even with Erigon 2 as of today.
So, as I understood, what you are more or less describing is kind of possible right now in Nethermind, but it brings us to the issue that Samnat mentioned, that some peers wouldn't be able to serve historical data while other peers would require them. And yeah, this is also possible with config flags in Nethermind right now. But I think the idea of 4.4 is to kind of combine it maybe with hard fork, so you will all the peers will drop serving historical data more or less in the same time. That's how I get it. I might be wrong here. And there is another thing that I would like to ask Lion, because he might know it better. Do you know what is the status about deposits? I know that Lodestar cannot get them from Checkpoint Sync, but what about other CL clients? They are kind of ready to drop this deposits data from ELs or
Yeah, I think everyone supports, and Lodestar will do shortly, so should be fine.
Sorry, feel free to just talk, because I'm trying to write at the same time. It's a bit difficult as a lot's being said. Igor, go ahead.
So one more question to Lion. Could you please explain, if you know, of course, how Portal Network intended to be interconnected with layer 1 and existing infra? I mean, if it's optimistic optimization, I mean, what happens if, for example, we have data inconsistency? Do we roll back to the mechanism that we are currently using, or what are the guarantees?
So if I understand, Portal Network is to retrieve data that has been finalized and cannot be changed, and you are also always retrieving via hashes and Merkle proofs. So data can never be incorrect. Data can only be lost. And about how the data would flow from L1 to Portal Network, the idea is to have bridge nodes, which is a very fancy term for some node that knows everything about L1 and broadcasts or feeds the data into the Portal Network. But I wanna, so maybe just help me understand EIP 4444, because I don't get it. So all economic activity will be moved to L2s, and L2s have just 2 weeks of guaranteed data availability on L1, and we are fine with that. I'm not sure if you know about that, but consensus layer only keeps blocks for 6 months, and we have been doing that for a while. So why do we care so much about old execution blocks? And what's the big deal about, I don't know, I don't get it.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So the difference between execution blocks and beacon blocks is that beacon blocks only contain things that are related to consensus, as far as I understand, deposits, withdrawals, etc., stuff like that. And these are also noted down in execution blocks. But execution blocks have the actual ledger of and like history of transactions that actually happened on the network, and thus these have like certain value to certain for archival purposes, for tax purposes, for a lot of things. Like if you want to have a historical, like I have, for example, an application on my phone that has all the transactions that I do. Whenever I do a transaction, I put it on this application. I have like years and years of history of all of these transactions that I do every day. And I can go back and do calculations or like look at them at any time. So this is valuable to users of the blockchain and a lot of people's opinions, right? The idea of 4/4s is that instead of holding the whole chain, we would have some mechanism to store the old blocks older than 1 year and drop anything that is and then execution nodes can drop any block that is older than 1 year, given the guarantee that someone else already has it and archived it somewhere, so it can be served to whoever needs it.
Right. I get that part, but the point is even the consensus data is not getting lost, and it's really important. Like we want to preserve those blocks, but it's kind of, they will always be there. Like some explorer, some entity, someone will have the blocks. Like it's really unreasonable to consider them to be lost. So any solution to distribute this data through some P2P protocol will be incredibly inferior to anything that Etherscan or the Graph or some indexer will build. So
100%.
if you're interested in that, like
100%.
if you're interested in the data, you would definitely use those services and probably not the other ones. Like
I quite agree. And like index data is way better than just random blocks that you don't even know that they will benefit you or not. Like for example, if you're interested in your own transactions, most of the blocks will not have transactions that you have made, but you are storing them anyways because you want history of your own transactions. I understand where you're coming from. It would be way easier to like export a CSV file from Etherscan or something like that, right? With all of the history of your all your transactions. I completely understand. But some people, especially certain teams in the execution community, they think that preserving these historical blocks is important, and they think that it's their duty or their like it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that they don't get lost. That's what they're trying to do, which is honorable. I don't see the problem with that. That's why we're working on Era 1 format for exporting and archiving, so they can, all of these blocks can be uploaded, for example, to the Internet Archive or to BitTorrent or whatever. Way better solution of storage and retrieval than P2P.
Right, makes sense.
So that is why I ask what's good enough for Gnosis Chain, because it's open question. I think Ethereum aims to have like fully decentralized portal network when you can retrieve history and so on. And I'm not saying that it's a good or bad solution, but in theory, if you store those blocks somewhere, I don't know where, then it is, what we want to achieve, right? So this is open question, what we want to. Oh gosh.
Yeah, I agree. Even a centralized way of storing it, or storing it on a BitTorrent and providing few seeds that are well maintained and backed would be potentially just enough, right? We don't have to have extremely robust way of doing that, and it can be under Gnosis as an entity, and it's fine because the data is being provable. So yeah, I don't see a big deal of doing that. And to be honest, even on Ethereum, if Ethereum Foundation just said that this is the history and then stored it and it guaranteed it, I think it would be good enough, right? So yeah, even just doing that is a decent way of doing this.
So we can, for example, agree that a few entities like Gnosis, Nethermind, Erigon, Gateway, whatever, and probably some more entities store those data and provide seeds. That might be good enough solution. But just
probably the biggest problem is data transfer, right? So if you just store it, it's one thing, but you probably want to allow people to download it on demand, and that might be costly, right? Because it costs transfer.
Yeah, I have made my position very clear, I think. But yeah, to reiterate, I think some P2P solution would be overkill for Gnosis specifically. So yeah, something like torrent or something else would be fine. I think let's go one by one on the different premises. I think we all agree that data would never be lost. This is extremely unlikely. There will always be someone that would have the data. Then the second one is we want newcomers that do not hold this data to access it eventually. And I think that speed is not a problem. So we should just guarantee that if you want to get the data, you would get it eventually. So talking about your concerns about bandwidth, as long as someone serves this data in some sort of connection, then it should be fine, even if it takes a long time. And if you're concerned about speed, you should just use an indexer. Lukasz?
So in my opinion, just saying data will never be lost, it won't solve itself, right? So there needs to be some procedure of storing this data and some mechanism of storing this data. That's one thing. Second thing, no idea how external indexers, what data format they will use. The upside of having data in the format that can be imported to a node is doing an archive sync and reconstructing all the state, right? Just from blocks, for example. And if we are able to reconstruct all the state, we can run any analysis on the state, right? Any tracing. And not just tracing, we can do tracing with some overrides, with some changes to the state and testing different things and extracting additional information. And it depends what you are doing, right? But this is the upsides of having this data in a format that is compatible with a node. And yeah, so that's basically it.
And there is one addition to portal network solution from my side. One benefit is that they plan to somehow add a chunk of data on every node. So you don't need to store the whole history, but you store a part of it. So in this way, you kind of have it decentralized. Of course, it might be overkill for Gnosis Chain, but just saying how it works.
So just to kind of get some context, how does the torrent creation work on Erigon right now? Like, who has authority to create those? Is it like an automatic process? Is it manual?
It's in the code, and anybody running the code would end up with the same, file hashes and everything. So the flat files are going to be identical, but we do put those hashes onto the code time to time. So let's say for every 100,000 blocks, you get a new torrent file, and we are the ones who update it manually, as in like with pipelines and everything. But even if you were to do it, you would end up with the same file. That's by design.
But then, I mean, if you don't update the clients, so don't release a new version, for example, then you would not download the entire chain, right? Or how would you find those torrents that are not hard-coded in the client?
You would need Erigon nodes on the network for Erigon 2. For Erigon 3, you would need nodes serving you that data as well. So if say you run a node and then decided to delete or not seed those flat files that contain history, Erigon 2 cannot sync anymore at all. With Erigon 3, that goes even worse. Like if you are synced and you're not broadcasting those files and not broadcasting history either, then Erigon 3 would not be able to sync at all. So it would be important for all nodes to serve that respective network's files. For Erigon 2, it would be historical snapshots. For Erigon 3, it would be state snapshots. And of course, other snapshots if you're into historical availability.
Right. So everything we discussed right now is mostly for historical data, right? But how do we serve the latest like state snapshots?
The process is the same. It's just that the integration is different. So you directly get the state with those files in Erigon 3. And the procedure, rest of it is the same. But with Erigon 2, even after you have the files, you have to reconstruct the state, and you don't get the state directly from those files.
Right. And there's, I mean, is there something for other clients, or that is a bit like specs out for 444, or is that just like the way Erigon works right now, but that it's not compatible with anything? Like, how does ERA files work, for example? Is that supposed to be the generic formats?
No, it's not generic. It's sort of specific to the code base in Erigon. And if other clients have to do it, they would have to borrow the code through which Erigon does it. So it's not, published or supported by EF, for instance.
And so is there anything supported by the EF to do something similar for the state snapshots?
So I don't know about that, what EF supports, but everything related to snapshots and historical data in Erigon 2 was different from Erigon 1, for instance. So that was the innovation in Erigon 2 to put historical data onto flat files and do this BitTorrent network syncing, and building on top of it was Erigon 3. So I don't think any other clients did it. And I don't think there was a contribution from or to EF in that respect.
Got it. And Nethermind, how would you prefer to implement this, like, syncing from a snapshot?
So if it's about state sync, we are doing snap sync. So we are kind of syncing to the head of the chain. We don't need snapshot, let's say. So we don't need history at all to sync with the head of the chain. I think this is short answer. Of course, if you are doing archive sync, then the situation is a little bit different, because you need all blocks. You don't need state at all, but you need to start from Genesis and have all blocks. Does it answer your question more or less?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, in theory, we could already activate, let's say, this EIP with snap sync, right? And then and then the historical part is completely different, let's say. But then, of course, Erigon wouldn't work.
Yeah. So if you let's say have some guarantee that history is somewhere available, Nethermind could totally drop all the history. And if we are not talking about archive sync, because it's different, talking about only snap sync, you could drop the history with with 2 config files, and that's it. But this is, we need it for archive sync. For Erigon, we need to have some guarantee that this data is available.
All right. And Erigon, is this something? I mean, is snap sync, something you could implement, or I mean, how would that work so that it works with Nethermind and also Erigon and Geth?
It would need changes. So I think most of the clients have their own formats for doing snap sync. I think the CL has its own way too. So I think we have 5 different implementations at this point. Only way forward to be able to do this is to implement this thing in protocol, and it's not there. So unless that happens, we are unable to, process or proceed in that direction. Because for Erigon or for Nethermind for that matter, I would say the code is proprietary. So it's open source, but it's not developed in collaboration. So I don't think cross formats would work out of the box unless we have an EIP for that. And it's possible that some of the implementation are already using a common format or a derived common format. But Erigon has its own format at this point, unless you want to change the whole code over there. So, we would do that after sort of it gets published and standardized.
So, if I can say something, so in my opinion, we probably will be going for mainnet, and for any other network, we could go with SnapSync for Geth and Nethermind as a way of syncing nodes to the tip of a chain. And hopefully we can agree on ERA formats for block history and receipt history. And maybe Erigon can implement syncing ERA format from ERA format as an archive node, so for the full sync. And for everything close to the tip of a chain, I think Erigon cannot really support SnapSync, at least not easily, because of different storage formats and different data formats, and it's impossible with at least not a big change, and I'm not sure if it's even possible at all. So yeah, I think that needs to be somewhat proprietary to Erigon, and we cannot do anything. The only thing I would like to agree is that ERA format is good enough for us to store historical blocks and receipts, and Erigon potentially adding that support at some point, that they can use that as for example, a recovery method or a full archive sync method, that if someone wants to go through all the blocks. So we would have guarantee that Erigon can be resynced, even if like every node in the network goes wipe out, that it can be resynced and recovered, and that's good enough. And I don't think we can achieve anything better.
Yeah, I mean, I would say ERA files are definitely enough. I mean, just to clarify, is that the same format as the Nimbus ERA files thing for the consensus layer?
Similar, but it has some differences. That's why that Nimbus format is called ERA, and this one is called ERA 1 because it's only execution blocks, whereas ERA format is beacon blocks, I believe.
Ahmad, I have a quick question because you might know. Is this ERA format ready only for pre-merge blocks right now? Am I correct here?
The ERA 1 format that we have is ready for, yes, pre-merge blocks.
Okay.
The ERA format is used for any blocks, beacon blocks afterwards.
Where is this format defined? Is that like the EIP 7542?
No, that format is defined in Geth code.
And Nethermind code.
Nethermind code, yeah, something like that.
Oh, so can you already create ERA files in Nethermind?
Yes, to my knowledge. I mean, we can export and import. I think it's not like, battle tested in any way. It was like more proof of concept solution.
So purely theoretically, right now you can already export ERA files and then resync a full node from ERA files, and then, well, no, because you're missing. Well, assuming we do the EIP you sent earlier, so 8266, you would also already be able to export pre-merge blocks with ERA files and then re-import them and then resync to tip.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is like merged this PR. I know that Anders was working on that from our team, and that's
Not merged yet.
sorry, Łukasz?
Not merged. It's still in PR.
Yeah. So it's like, in proof of concept state, maybe might have some bugs, but more or less, yes, that's the answer.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it's not production ready, but it's something that we could focus in and deliver in the next few months.
Okay, that's definitely very interesting. So that's a good step then towards having that, and then we just basically need to upload those files on BitTorrent or something, and then we have everything, right?
Well, we need some kind of procedures to maintain this, right? So at least the social consensus that we guarantee to serve that, right?
Yeah. Sure. I think that would come on top of it anyways, or I mean, I guess that's a conversation for later once we have the tech.
So one problem that could be needing of a solution is that, as mentioned, this Era 1 format is for pre-merge blocks mostly. I understand that Gnosis has Aura before. I'm not sure if this format is compatible with Aura blocks or not. This has to be checked. Another thing would need to be checked is if post-merge blocks are gonna be like used in Era format, and if we are gonna support Era format as well.
That's actually an excellent point with the Aura things.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
that's something we
both would
definitely-
have to be worked on, right? But those are details to iron out. But yeah, there are a lot of details yet to iron out. It's not production ready at all.
So can we at least agree that we will pursue this like Era 1 formats for historical data, and then I guess SnapSync for states, sync, except for Erigon, which then is a whole different problem. But at least for Nethermind and Geth, well, I mean, of course we can't talk for Geth, but that's kind of the plan. And then we could support this, as soon as possible, basically. I mean, without going through the portal and whatever.
Yes, I think makes sense. And not sure, maybe question to Erigon. As I understand, you will have to ship Erigon free to kind of ready of that change of the network. Like, imagine that Nethermind will drop all the blocks. Would it affect you?
No, so we are trying to release Erigon 3 sooner than later. But at this point, it's not ready yet. So I assume that, at least for the next 6 months, there would be Erigon 2. Erigon 2 does not depend on Nethermind or any other clients for historical data. It depends on other Erigon nodes, and we have backup web seed for that. So for the next 6 months, I can clearly say that Erigon 2 would be able to sync even if historical data was dropped by other clients. Like we have good enough infrastructure to support that, even private infrastructure for supporting that. With Erigon 3, there would be a problem of integrating 4.4s. If Erigon 3 moves forward with it, then we would have to make changes to Erigon 3 to support other formats for historical data, not just because we want to sync to the tip. I mean, that would be a given, but for nodes that want to do historical or archival node. So I think we would cross the bridge when we come to it. Maybe see you in 6 months about it.
So one question would be here is that can't Erigon 3 node recreate the historical state from the blocks themselves if Erigon syncs the blocks?
Yes, it can.
Oh, okay. So you don't really need to sync historical state. You only need the tip.
No, you need to sync tip as well as historical blocks. to be
Yeah,
able to
historical.
serve the historical blocks.
If you want an archive node, you can just
Yeah.
get the blocks, process them, and that will be enough. You don't need state snapshots of the history. Just to make things
No,
clear.
yes, you don't need state snapshots of history if you don't want to serve history.
No, but if I'm saying if you want to save history.
So for that, I might have a gap in understanding if this is possible to recreate older blocks. Of course, Erigon 3, the way it operates is different. So it does that reconstruction of older execution points in a way, in a manner of speaking. So yes, it already does that, but not without constructing the files necessary to do that. To answer your questions, if we don't have historical data, we cannot reconstruct historical data.
No, so data is a very general term. My question is,
Blocks.
if you have historical blocks, can you reconstruct historical state and serve it as Erigon 3? That was my question. That was my clarification. Okay, thank you.
Yes, but I'm not sure if you mean what you mean by serving. Is it like P2P serving, or is it like RPC
No,
requests?
not P2P. I meant RPC.
All right. Yeah, surely RPC would work. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's move on to another subject because there's also a lot to discuss on that side. Presumably, I suppose Richard joined for that. So maybe, I mean, I don't have the full context, but it's regarding so EIP 3074 and 5003. Yeah, maybe if you have some context.
Yes, also in light of time, I will keep it short. I mean, I assume most of the people are familiar with 3074, which is OS and OS core. The question here is, and this has been discussed also in a couple of other formats and channels, especially also with Vitalik and Yoav and a couple of other people from the ecosystem, also then, is can we extend it to 5003, which would basically also allow then the full transition to basically like place code at a specific address using auth, like it authorizes this one. The rationale is why would it be nice to have this is that also looking at the timeline of the hard forks coming up, it's that if we don't do it now, we see that 3074 kind of sits there without being fully utilizable for the account abstraction roadmap of Ethereum, because for the next roughly 1.5 to 2 years, it's worker trees, right? And 5003 would be a big asset in the toolbox to really push forward native account abstraction, which I mean, there are a couple initiatives also on the layer 2s, or like the main initiative being RIP 7560, which is basically, okay, trying to showcase what can we do native before it goes into Ethereum mainnet. But yeah, this is where 503 would be immensely helpful. What would be good to know is, because similar to 3074, where has been already a lot of discussions around what are security implications on this, it would be interesting to know also here from the, especially from the core dev side, what would be blockers for this one? Like what are security considerations that we say here we have to have a solution that would make it feasible to include it together with 3074. And so I would assume everything that has been solved by 3074, we don't have to reiterate for 5003. Jesus Christ, bad number. Yeah. And yeah, it's especially in the context of Gnosis and Gnosis Chain, right? Like this is where we say, obviously we do see an incentive to push forward native account abstraction and having the tools ready on Gnosis Chain for native account abstraction, also related obviously to the history of Gnosis and its former own product of Safe, which is very much related to account abstraction. So yeah, this is basically, we would like to improve the tool chain. So the TLDRs, we would love to have it, to have a better tool stack for pushing native account abstraction. And the question is what is necessary? What are blockers? Why core devs would say we would not include this, so that we can answer this question and can research and find solution for them.
So to be honest, I haven't looked that deep into 503, so I don't have any like conclusions. And in general, those questions are also good to be asked on a more broad for audience, right? So consider discussing 503 on all core devs, for example, and discussing in a broader audience. So I don't have any thing yet on my mind about it. In terms of could it be implemented? Probably it could, if that would be the focus. But again, I didn't do any security analysis on it, for example.
Yes.
There are concerns from other people. I have like similar status as Lucas, so I haven't analyzed the CIP. I know that Ahmed, you took a look, so maybe you can chime in a little bit here.
Yeah. So the concerns mostly surround that with EIP 5003, the private key, whatever it is that has been used for the EOA until this point is still a valid private key. It's true that on this chain it won't be acceptable anymore, but if we look at certain mechanisms that have been employed by some adjustments of ERC20 tokens, for example, some of them depend on signature messages to do approve instead of an actual approved transaction, and in this case that would result in this case, if this key is compromised, even if you have converted your account into an account abstraction or a smart account, right, this key would still pose a security for you if it was exposed in any way. Another issue would be is that this key would still be valid on all of the other chains. So if there is any L2s or whatever, if you do this auth SERP where you declare a smart contract instead of an EOA on this chain, that's not necessarily the case that will happen on all the other chains. And then your address on all of the other chains. So like it would break composability kind of, because like all smart contract wallets, when you import a key, you can use this key in any chain. With smart accounts, I know that's not the case. It's kind of different. It depends where you deploy the smart account, etc. But like that's one of advantage of EOAs that users are used to that would be broken also with the CIP. These are the concerns from some of the participants, from even some of the authors of the EIP, right? But yeah.
Yes, I mean, I'm completely aware of these cases or the concerns. The question for me is that like there are on multiple levels where we say, okay, there's UX concerns, there are application level concerns, we have smart contract level concerns, and then what I'm here about is more like, okay, do we see on a basically execution layer level concerns? Do we see that? And for me, it's totally fair if you say, okay, no, implementation wise, there's no concerns, because let's take, for example, there was a proposal to avoid that a permit is impacted by this, or to increase the security of permit, is that easy recover would not allow or would not work for smart, like for accounts or for addresses that have code, right? Like, so basically it would change the logic of the code. I don't want to go deep into the details of this discussion. The rundown is that it would touch an existing precompile, and especially also how Vitalik summarized it as like potentially introduce some like dependence on a state, which is a first time for precompile. And here for me, the first sentiment would be, okay, how big of a blocker is this for the core, like, or for the devs of the nodes? Is it a challenge? Do we need to find a different solution to solve the specific problem of that on the same chain, even signatures are valid for like EC recover can be done for a smart account then? Because I think the cross-chain interaction, while also still a valid problem, something that I think necessary a different group of people should solve, not the one that is currently in this call. Like, I'm happy to hear to get the feedback on this one, but I think the expertise here right now is a little bit different. And this is where the focus would be for me really to understand, okay, is touching existing precompiles to change their behavior a no-go right now? Or like
So
no-goes where you don't
the
care?
problem with touching the precompile is not that it's a no-go. Like I think EC Recover is already super expensive, as in like one of the most expensive precompiles. I think it's not the most expensive as far as I know, but it's one of like it's expensive. And requiring access to state to know, for example, if a certain account has has code or it does not, could potentially mean that we should also increase the gas cost of such precompile, as well as it would affect the performance of the precompile, making it a bit slower to process, which is normal. If you increase its gas, that's how gas works, right? But the issue is it would break composability with all the other chains that do not change this precompile, right? Then gas cost on a chain that would change this precompile would be different than on chains that don't change this precompile. Yeah. So
That being said,
there are
like the gas costs.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I do agree, and I think it's actually the gas cost change is a very important factor. I would say cross-chain or cross-network, I think it's less critical in the sense of that we see that certain, depending on the type of chain that you have, since computation is sometimes cheaper, whereas in call data is more expensive, so you have already adjustments like smart, at least on smart contract level and also smart accounts, it is already bad practice to hard code certain gas assumptions. But I totally get your point, because in any case, if you touch gas costs for for any opcode, you would have to consider what impact does it have on existing accounts. No, not even for composability, but then it opens a little bit a different can of worms, how we like to say. Right, like, so this is definitely valuable feedback on this side.
I don't personally have any more feedback on this. Like, I'm no expert. Let's just say I'm no expert. I just like know what have been said, and I'm not like a researcher on this specific topic. But yeah, Marek.
Yeah, I'm just thinking perhaps it would be a good idea for us to familiarize a little bit more with this and talk next call about this one. Or maybe for what I could advise, Richard, you is maybe try to talk on all core devs call about this, rise the point in agenda, because I'm not sure if I understand your intention, but you try to get like general feedback about the CAP, and you are not trying to push it only for Gnosis Chain. Because for Gnosis Chain, we can talk in this group, let's say, but if we want to like go for Ethereum mainnet, then we need to talk on all core devs calls.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I will also join this next week, right? Like this week is consensus layer, next week is execution layer. It's already planned. I think on Gnosis Chain side, right? Like it would be maybe then the question, can we push it here if we don't push on mainnet, which is a completely different beast. I would not go there right now. But I think the general intention is already what I mean, the feedback from Ahmad was quite helpful, especially on the permit case, adjusting EC Recover. It was basically to get early feedback before we go into the all core devs meeting, where it's then pushed to a wider ecosystem. So this was already very helpful. Thanks. And with
All right,
this,
I think it would be nice to just look into this a bit and then maybe post some comments on Telegram or something. So that would always be interesting. But yeah, for once we've exceeded time, which has never happened for the past year, I think. So that's interesting. But yeah, we'll talk about updates and everything else next week. There's nothing very pressing at this time anyways. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.